everyone. Hey, if you want to play a Savage Worlds setting where you get to feel the culture, the struggles, and the people of Appalachia, all while fighting creatures and supernatural and ultra-capitalists, well, Peg's got a setting for you, and it's called the Holler.
It's a savage world, strangers a weird war. It's a savage world, classics to explore.
Hey everybody, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango with Eric.
Hello.
And we're here to talk to you about a new Peg setting called the Holler, created and written by Tim Early. As it explains itself, it says, Holler is a game about labor conflict, Appalachian culture, environmental apocalypse. Woo! The setting draws heavily from the folklore, the history of the region, but it's a mythical creation, so it is not historically accurate. You can get the book, $44.95 for the book in the PDF, and $24.99 for the PDF. And the version we are looking at actually kind of looked more at 1.1, but it's at 1.2 now. Index isn't there yet, but expect more. So if you're watching this after, there could be some changes after V1.2. So what do you think, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, I think first thing first to say, this is not Deadlands. This is not the South. There's definitely similarities between kind of Deadlands and the South, but Appalachia just historically was, it was so isolated geographically and culturally, and it has so much of its own culture. I knew a little bit. I was really into the music. I know I've had instruments like banjos and mountain dulcimer and all that stuff. So I've always loved the instruments and music, but this was really cool. It says it's not a historic one, it's a recreation, but let's just say off the bat, there's a lot of historical stuff in here. I think the writer, Tim Early, is a Appalachian historian. I think he teaches stuff like that. So this is chock full of that kind of stuff.
Very cool. So we talked a little bit before we jumped on that this is, it's coming from Peg, but it feels a lot like different, like you said, it's different than Deadlands and some of the other Peg material. It feels like a third-party setting in the sense that it's got everything there you need. We'll talk more about that, but it's got plot point campaign, it's got kind of full rules for everything. It's got a bestiary, it's got everything you need. Yeah. So, where do you want to start, Eric? Where do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, first, again, just to kind of reiterate what the setting is, it's using Appalachia in the 40s, Depression era. At that time, there was a drought that happens. It made me, once I started reading this, it really made me think of the Battle of Blair Mountain, which is a real historic event that happened in the Coal Wars, where it's the only time that in the continental U.S. Americans have been bombed, and it was by a coal company. It's pretty crazy, so I recommend anybody who's interested in this to go check that out. Kind of this existential, oppression and isolation and being exploited. That kind of think of the company store, but times 100. Right, Carl? That's the impression I got, and yeah. I like that they went supernatural because I think it would have been hard to do this kind of game of just hey, you're in Appalachia and you work at a company store and you're being, oppressed or something. So the supernatural bent, I think, is good here.
Yeah. So it has a lot of the I don't want to say tropes because hallmarks. It's much more than that. The hallmarks, that's better. So it has a lot of that in it. And you mentioned a company store. There is a company store, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So it really has all of that flavor. So why don't we talk a little bit about the book to start with? What do you think about the format, how it's put together, the artwork, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, like you said before, this it reads like a third party, or not reads, but it kind of feels like a third party, but it also definitely feels Peg. I mean, the level of quality as far as graphic design and layout, all that stuff, that is definitely an official product, for sure. So all of that was good. The readability was good. The art, I think some people are going to either love it or hate. I think is that kind of situation, Carl. I mean, I know that you right?
Well,
It's kind of
definitely,
cartoony.
yeah, it definitely has it has its own flair, its own style, and hopefully I can put an image up so folks can see. Wasn't my favorite, but that's the point. Is every book has its different flavor, but it's well done. Absolutely,
Yeah, it's well
fantastic.
done. It's good. Yeah, and it's consistent, and it actually grew on me a bit at first. And let's say up front, there's a map at the very beginning, and it's chock full of locations. I mean, that's something that we, greatly appreciate, especially when, one of our favorite settings, Monster Hunter, Monster whatever.
Monster Hunter Club.
Monster Hunter Club, thank you. We love that setting, but there was no map that drove us crazy. So there's a map here that's greatly appreciated. One kind of thing that I feel like is a missed opportunity, I would have loved to see a recommended music reading list, a kind of like movie, TV shows, reading music, just because Appalachian, most people don't really know Appalachian culture and mythology and all that stuff, right? We just think, oh, it's the South, or they're just hillbillies. Like, there's so much more to it. So I really wish there was something for me. Like, again, I'll recommend just some musicians that I love, like Doc Boggs and Clarence Ashley are some excellent that kind of era Appalachian musicians. The movie October Sky. So if you're interested, check those out. So that's just a missed opportunity for me. Anything else you think?
Well, you spoke of the map. The map is very stylized, very kind of cool looking. It'd be nice to have a map that was more of the traditional top-down look, so you could get a feel for, pull it into your VTT, be able to move kind of where people are on the map. I know it's stylized and it's not meant to be wargame-ish, but it would have been cool to have sort of a top-down map too. But
But there's a map.
Yeah, but there's a map.
That's
so I'm
already
not going to
huge.
complain about that. It's a very cool looking map. It's a very cool looking map. So okay.
And the one last thing I wanted to touch on that I did think they did very well in this, and I think this is something to you that you often talk about, is in more so than most books I've seen, and they don't really talk about it specifically, but there's definitely a split of like, here's something that if you were the GM, you could just say, okay, the first 100 pages, here's for players. And then the rest is for GMs. And even in that, they split the lore up. So the Gazetteer or whatever, there's like almost like a player's version and there's a GM version. And a lot of that is kind of broken up. So that's another good thing that I think they did, is that as a GM, you could just, give half the book.
I really like when you can sort of kind of print a few pages out or a bunch of pages and give people that feel, because there's so much, like you said, there's so much to the culture. There's so much to what makes the Appalachian area, and if the players can't read that, they're going to come in without, they kind of have to absorb it a little bit, right, before they get there. And so I really appreciate that too, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there are, I run into problems all the time where it's like, well, can I pull this piece out, and how do I pull it out to get it to the players? So good point. Yeah, very well done. I agree.
So let's move on to character options, I think.
Let's talk about again, classic book layout. So first thing is character creation and character options. Take her away.
Yeah, I would say here, character options, out of all things in the book, this is the most sparse. There just isn't a lot here. And this is a big book too. So this is kind of the most sparse part. Starting with gear. Gear is, the interesting thing that I saw is that there's actually no money listed at all for gear. Everything uses a barter system, which is cool. And availability is very strong. Like when you start out, you get 3 common items and that's it. And a common item could be like a shovel or a boot or like, a flask. Like you're not getting a lot starting. I think that's a credit to the system, right? They want you to feel like you're coming from, this book is ultimately about being an underdog and like overtaking this big power, ultra, like you said, a corporate kind of Big Brother, whatever. So
and if you look at, and if you look at the sort of the archetypes or kinds of characters they list in the front of the book, they're all like regular folks kind of thing. That's the whole point, right? These are regular people fighting against the system in a sense, right? So very cool.
And the system ultra. Now, the only thing here that I kind of still wish there was money just so that GMs could know what things are valued as, because as is, they don't really give they talk about the barter system, but there really isn't anything like, hey, GMs, this is how you do like handle buying goods or trading goods. There's kind of none of that. I don't know if you saw that. I didn't see anything
they've got
about that,
rare, ultra rare, they've got that system, but that's just really you could use that, but like you said, there's no money value to it. So if I find an ultra rare item or a rare item, what does that mean as far as what do I got to barter to get it? Role playing opportunity, I guess. Call it a social conflict and see if you can get it.
Yeah, is it just common for common? Like it's fine. I like that. I just wish there was a little bit more there to, you know, to be like, this is kind of how you can run it as a GM. That's all. But you know, there didn't have to be a big gear list, and that's cool. There is actually like a separate gear list for the
big boys.
The big boys. Thank you. I was like big dog. The big boys, which I really like. That like even the players saw that they could be like, oh crap, this is what we're in for. Because overall, this is a very low power setting for the players. For the players, it is not a low power system for the things that you're facing. So again, I think this is really, they're really going double down on like, you are against these kind of huge odds and you are the little dogs, right?
Yeah.
So anything but the gear for you want to add or?
No, I just like, I mean, I like that it just, again, the gear brings the flavor. So I'm all about the rules bringing the flavor, and the gear really had that. I love the idea of the real big guns they have are like these big, black powder weapons.
Yeah.
So like the paw, I think one was called a paw or something like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And you don't have to worry about players becoming gear hogs and spending all their time trying to find it, because there's not a lot.
This is not Cyberpunk. This is not Cyberpunk. That's absolutely right. So let's move on to skills and grudges, hinders, edges, all that stuff. What do you think?
Well, skills. There's a few differences. I think there's folklore split from occult. There's distilling, which is for the arcane background, which I think you'll probably talk a little bit about. But,
and folk magic.
Yeah, for the folk magic.
Arcane background.
Yeah, so it's pretty that's pretty straightforward. From a hindrance standpoint, I look at it, do the hindrances, so I don't want to necessarily list through them all, but do the hindrances and edges kind of bring flavor? And so there's hindrances like feud. I mean, think about it. That's like a classic idea there. And then edges, for example, there's edges that are very aligned to, like, there's the minor edge, there's the gouger edge, which I think we'll talk about what gouging is, which is pretty cool. And then, so again, the edges are there's not a lot, but they're a good flavor. What do you think?
Yeah, all around, I do wish there was more here. I really do, because I think, me and you talk about this a lot, and I think we appreciate kind of that showing, not telling part of when you have such a strong lore book like this. And we talked about even with like Monster Hunters Club, which is the 80s, which a lot of people, we know the 80s, but a lot of people wouldn't. It's nice having that kind of crutch of character options, kind of pulling some of that weight of like, to make you feel more like you're, in this kind of specific setting. So I wish there was a little bit more here. The ones that they have are good, and I like them a lot. I just wish there was some more here, but yeah. Picking and grinning, I thought was really cool too. So it's definitely enough, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it adds to that flavor, and that's the important part. I always worry about settings that have too many edges that are basically duplicating edges that already exist just for the sake of having more edges. But you're probably right. There's probably even more flavor they could bring in. Because at the beginning of the book of the character creation, there are pages of different styles of characters you can play, and there's got to be a couple more edges in there somewhere that would make those characters what they are, right? Professional edges or something like that. So okay,
and I think part of the reason is just the page count. I mean, we know that official books don't like to go over a certain amount, and I think the page count for this, 253 is what I counted.
I think it's about 253 before the index.
Before the index, obviously. So and there's a plot point campaign, and there's just so much history that has to be explained. So I part of it is I get why there's not a lot. It's just kind of I wish there was a little more. But
okay, well let's keep keep going.
There's a section called like here's kind of, again, they've split up the setting part of it. So the first part for kind of players and GMs alike, it's called Life in the Holler, which has a gazetteer and the folkways, which kind of the most, I would say that, like, compared to official books, again, there's so much in here because there's a plot point campaign that it's not maybe the longest things as far as like the Gazetteer, but everything is dense in this book. This is a very dense book. Like they stretched every sentence out. So even if it's like a little block of text, there's a lot in that block of text. I don't know if you got that same impression.
They don't waste a lot of, the space is not wasted. Every word counts.
Yes.
It means something. It's there for a purpose. Definitely.
The folkways was a really cool section that I liked, which was kind of just these folk traditions in the Holler, which some of them I'm sure are real. I kind of don't know which is real and which is just completely fictitious or kind of put from folklore, but. What we talked about gouging. So gouging is brought up here. It's also in the setting rules. Gouging is this like kind of this unarmed fights that would happen. That's kind of like a blood sport almost, and it's for pride. And if you beat somebody, you could basically permanently disfigure somebody as kind of your reward, like as a
right. You can
be like a mark of shame. So the heathen, which I thought was cool, which was this like. Basically, everybody gets drunk, including the kids. And there's just a lot of these. I mean, there's like 7 or 8 of these kind of very, very, very specific role-playing setting like things. So
and after cool. The heaving, what I liked is after the heaving, your sorrow's gone, your animosity towards people are gone. It's like a cleansing.
It's a cleansing.
It's like a detox through heavy drinking.
Yeah, I thought that was cool too.
That was pretty neat. So this section, when we talk about life in Holler, is exactly what you're talking about. This is the players can look at it, they can understand it, they can use it, and then you start moving into other sections of the book. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with respect to the players' side of the life in Holler?
There's still setting rules here that I think the players could read. So like they talk about gouging, they talk about blight. Which everybody does know about Blight, so let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, should talk about Blight because that's really part and parcel to why these people exist in the way they exist. So,
I mean, so part of the crux of the setting, I guess we never really got into specifics, is that there's Appalachia. This is during the Depression. During that time, there was the Depression was obviously going on. There's droughts going on, so industries are failing, and in the real world, there was like companies coming in and exploiting people, and basically people were like indentured servitude or almost slaves in these companies, sort of, where you would work and you would get paid, but you had to pay
you'd live in their housing, you'd shop in their store.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
So they kind of took that, but they have this kind of there's this mysterious group called the Big Boys, right? Right?
Yeah, big boys. Big boys.
The big boys.
The big boys.
There's kind of these almost these mythological industrialists, but you can see them, but they're in their own sect, and something that's happened with the they had these like 4 horsemen like people almost before, kind of praising them and saying they're going to come and do all these good things and bring you technology, and people kind of rebelled against that at one point, and it was this big battle, and then one of the people that died cursed everybody, and that's what kind of led to this. There was this kind of supernatural separation that happened. I don't want to give too much stuff away, but
because some of that's in the GM section, so don't get there, right? So
well, no, but some of it's in. They talk about it. I mean, everybody knows this is happening. So Appalachia has been separated from reality. It's in its own sub-reality.
Well, it's separated from the reality by essentially a barrier. It's not like it's been moved to another dimension or something. It's just separated from reality by a barrier that people can't get through.
People can't go through, and there's this kind of poison around called the Blight, and they're all kind of related, and people don't really know. There's all this like conjecture and theories about where it's come from and who the big boys are and all that stuff. So there's a lot of like people just don't kind of know, and you might, some of your characters might know more or not. So there's a lot of things in there, the settings about what Blight does to you and what trying to get through the otherness, which is like the barrier. And one of the things that Blight does is that when you encounter it during things, you can get hindrances. But when you get hindrances, you also get advances. But then if you get enough hindrances, you actually become an NPC because you go so crazy. So it's this kind of, some people could become more powerful because they have more advances, but they also have more hindrances, but they're kind of ready to turn. So I think that's the biggest crux. And even in the setting itself, there's like spirits and there's demons and there's fae. So there's all these and people either might know where things come from or they don't. There's all these different theories, like I said. So, and some people, they work at the company store, and some people, they think that the big boys are doing good. So there's kind of a mix of, right, of like, this is where they talk about that all. So sorry, that was a lot, but that's the crux of the setting.
I mean, but that's really the point, right? Just so you understand, the question is, why don't people just leave? And there's a reason that they're sort of caught in this cycle of, poverty and, trying to get out of it or trying to fight back.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're in that cycle. So, okay, cool.
And like I said, like in real life, this was happening to a lesser degree, but it would be very hard to GM, I think, for most people that, to GM like a game like that, to kind of have the players go through that. I think that would be a very difficult thing to do, because some people could be like, oh, I'm just going to leave. I think doing it this way makes a lot of sense, of like, you are just forced to do this, right? To give you that feeling of oppression and isolation and everything. So,
right.
Cool. So let's move on to magic backgrounds.
Was there anything we want to touch any more on the setting rules?
Yeah.
Nope. We talked about Blight. Okay, it looks good. So let's go ahead and talk about magical backgrounds. I'm going to step back because arcane backgrounds are your thing.
Yeah. So like I said before, it's a very low powered setting. There's 3 magic backgrounds. There's the kind of the blessed. There's the folk magic. Let me actually go up, and then there's the moonshiner.
Yeah, moonshiner. That's cool.
Yeah. So the blessed, folk magic, and moonshiner. All of them, it's very low powered. There's nothing kind of, so with the blessed, which is kind of the divine caster, and the folk magic, which is kind of like more of like an occultish kind of like herbal stuff, remedies, talismans, that kind of thing. There's very small power lists. There's no added power edges at all. Some of them even have restricted power edges, and arcane failure is very punishing in this setting. Very punishing. So there's a lot of added stuff as far as arcane failure. Like I think the blessed can summon a demon. Folk magic, you can lose access to a power for your whole setting. So those are those 2. Like I said, very short, very small power list too. Nothing new there. The moonshiner is a little unique. That one is, if you kind of think of it as the kind of weird scientist a bit, but it's basically you get the artificer edge for free. But it uses its own, a little bit different, where distilling is the arcane background, and you use that for all roles. So even you could give somebody a concoction, and then when they drank it, they would roll your distilling die. And then even if you threw a bomb, basically, you would use your distilling in place of athletics. And even if you gave somebody else a bomb, they would roll your distilling, which is definitely unique. So usually with arcane things like that, you would roll use athletics to throw something, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Which I thought was really interesting is that if somebody else is drinking it or throwing it, and there's an arcane failure, they suffer the arcane failure. So if they're the ones who rolling that die and they fail, they're the ones getting it, and you become blind for like an hour. So as I said, it's very punishing arcane backgrounds. So I really, really like the moonshiner. I definitely, again, but that's just me. I would have liked to see a little bit, kind of unique stuff, kind of how Deadlands did it with theirs. Maybe like an edge for each of them that was unique, or something, some little twist on it, just to show more Appalachia. It's like that, going back to the showing, not telling. But it's definitely low power, right? So I don't know. How do you feel about that overall?
Well, I do like the fact that you were talking, if you have a failure drinking moonshine, you go blind. Well, that seems to be very flavorful. That makes a lot of sense. Sure. Yeah. But I agree, and I didn't look through real deep in the edges, but it would be nice if there were edges aligned with the different arcane backgrounds. That's always nice to, I'm trying to progress through this side of things, and I want to get better and better and better at it. But like you said, it's a very low power, so that may be part of the rationale. Is I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's true, and for me, like we talked about in our 100th episode, the Huckster, I just think is such a cool arcane background, and it's so thematic And it really, 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 that makes me feel, I don't have to do much. And I like to go crazy with my flavoring and everything. But like that just does so much for you already of feeling like you're this huckster and dealing with spirits and manitous, whatever. So I would like to see that a little bit more, but I get why it is the way it is, right? So nothing bad there at all. Just something kind of wishes.
But Moonshiner is definitely our favorite.
Yeah, Moonshiner has flavor, definitely. That's the one that has all the flavor. Yeah, let's move on to the next section. And this is where we get into, again, they call it setting rules again, which I thought was a little funny, but it's basically, the legend that they talk about some of the other stuff again, like there's the gazetteer, but it's the hidden gazetteer. So why don't we talk about this? This is kind of the GM section, right?
Yeah.
Carl?
I'll try to be we'll try to be careful and stay kind of vague, but it does talk about, and we mentioned it, how the world got segregated, how this part got segregated with more details as to the why and how and all that good stuff. It has and I don't know if this is really secret from the players because it's really part of what the players are going to be running into, but things about how the big boys kind of intimidate and oppress people. And we mentioned it, right? There's like the company store, you live in their housing, and each one of those in the book, they say, here's what the implication of, why did they do it? Here's the implication of it. So for a lot of stuff like that, and there's many of them. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to get to, because I think we forgot something earlier on in the character creation. They have a thing called grudge and goals setting, which we missed there, and that's basically every player has to pick out a grudge and a goal. So a grudge is like, how did the big boys screw them over? In what way? So they force you to write down that you as your player characters in this, what the big boys are all about. You know that they're oppressive, right? And that's part of the reason is like you have this grudge. So yeah, sorry, I just wanted to touch on that because we kind of missed that in the very beginning. So.
It was even in the notes. Oh, well.
I know.
So there's about how they intimidate and oppress. There's a section on that. It talks about some of this. I don't know if they're secret societies, but some of the different groups in the Holler that people can be part of. There's one of them I thought was kind of cool, and I wrote it down specifically. Was there's the folks that are kind of like the Midsummer Children are called, the tree huggers.
My favorite too. Yeah,
they're like the tree huggers.
Same thing. Yeah, I love them. Yeah.
I could totally see having a character be a tree hugger and
100%,
and originally be a miner, and then decide that once they left the mine, this is what they're going to do. So
yeah. That's really funny.
And then it does give some information about the things that aren't human, why they are, and it's all in the bestiary, but the different things, the
demons.
It talks about they call them cryptids. There's haints. There's unnatural, natural things, and then you mentioned the fae.
The fae,
why
which is a big
and
part
it talks about why these things exist, right? Which is good. And then it provides some secret locations, some things that the players don't necessarily. I don't know if they're secret, but
they're not secret. It just breaks down all the stuff on the map, basically, into all the regions of what you might discover.
But in a detail where you can then turn that into adventures that the characters don't know initially. They probably know a lot of these areas based on where they're from. But as they expand their knowledge of the area, of the map, you could kind of leverage these to drive some of that very... I think this book is really... all about narrative stuff a lot. I mean, you have to really enjoy that theme, and then the role playing's got to be part and parcel.
Oh yeah.
So did you have any other things in the legend that stood out to you?
No, I mean, like I said, what I said before, there's a lot there. If you look at the map is packed because this is a relatively small region. Again, this is not Deadlands, right? You don't have this big, expansive multi-states. This is a section of mountains that have been pulled out of reality or whatever, cut off from reality. So everything is very dense, right? So you might have a paragraph, but everything is like bam, bam, bam. So that's the thing that came out to me in that. Cool. Let's move on to the Adventure Generator.
Right. So we mentioned there's a lot of good material for creating adventures. So or doing that. So the first is the Adventure Generator, which is really well done. So go ahead. Why don't you walk us through that one?
I mean, it's probably the most expansive one I've ever seen, I think.
I
Like,
think I
they have-
agree with that. Yeah. There's a lot
Yeah,
there.
there's a bunch of tables, and they talk about ways to like, it kind of follows the similar thing of how most of them work, is that you decide on the type of thing you want to do, and you can either roll on that or you can choose it, like uprising, critter, or character study. It's kind of the main three, and then you roll in those tables, and then depending on which one of those, you can roll in a separate table. Then you can kind of combine them, like uprising can then have a character study on top of it, optionally, to kind of do a twist in there. And then there's like, after you roll, you can pull a card to have a suit. So there's a lot going on. It's very complex. There's a lot going on. So I think it's probably the most robust one I've seen.
Yeah, I would obviously have to create my Excel spreadsheet like I did for Interface 0 2.0 to be able to do the nice random tables and spit it out. But yeah, it's
totally unnecessary. But you got to do it, right?
All right, I could do it in JavaScript. That would make you happier. But anyway, so good, really cool adventure generator. That's awesome. I definitely
there's also a big
it.
NPC. There's also a big NPC.
Oh yeah, don't forget about
NPC
that. That was
too.
pretty cool. That was a little bit different. I hadn't run across a lot of that kind of stuff before, so it's cool that they got the NPC part. You want to talk about a little bit about that? Folks generator.
The folks generator. It's again, like, I've seen these small, but this is the most expansive one. It has all of the names you might see in Appalachia. It has, which I like, that it had like distinguishing details and occupation and kind of like a quirk, personality traits. So it's very expansive. Again, it's very expansive.
And by the way, you could just rip this directly off for other settings that don't have it, because the personality traits,
yes,
there's like 100 of them, and they're all very interesting. You could roll like a couple of them, see if they match. And then there's a motivation table. And then there's political persuasion, which is more specific. You're a company man, you're an apologist. It's got a lot there. So if you're looking to pull together, and I like the name too, because then you don't have to try to.
You don't have to think
guess
of one,
what's part of that cultural naming. So it's very cool.
It's very good. Yeah, very well done.
And then there's a plot point campaign. Like we said, that's very typical for like a third party, but it's. I'm not going to talk at all about what's in a plot point campaign, but there is a plot point campaign.
No, I think we can touch on. We can give a little bit of information. It's 10 pages. It's 10 chapters. It's 50 pages long. It's very dense. Generally it's and what the whole book's about, right? You are underdogs, and you're rising up to fight these oppressive people. They talk about that on the 10 players can understand that going in. So that's I won't get into any more details, but that's generally what it is, right? It's the kind of ultimate, Star Wars episode 3 or episode 4. You're the underground rebels going up. That is right. That's what it is. So. It's definitely up to the quality. If you other platform campaigns on my peg, this is that quality, right?
Yeah. I think it's done really well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm about to give some away, but it really brings people all over to Holler as part of what you're doing. So you get to play all over the place and learn all sorts of things. So it's cool. Then there's Savage Tales as well, which is always nice to have, because, generally, when you get a plot point campaign, if you got some good Savage Tales, you can kind of mix them in there, just like one sheets. And if you're here and there's a kind of a Savage Tale that makes sense, you might be able to mix that in instead of just keep walking through the plot point, because it's no fun to have a campaign just go like that, right? So
definitely, and these are, again, there's 11 of these. It's around, the whole section's around 41 pages. So so think of that, 11 of them, 41 pages. These are probably the biggest Savage Tales I've seen. These are the most expansive Savage Tales I've ever seen. These are proper side quests. If you're like a big, CRPG, these are like, Witcher side quests. I don't know if that relates to anybody, but these are almost their own plot point campaign. You could almost look at these as a plot point. So yeah, these are way bigger than, say, like Deadlands, those side tales, or, we did a review on the High Plains. These are way bigger than those, so expect a lot. These are as their own. These are almost their own little plot point campaign. So very dense. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, a lot of good. So we got plot point campaign, like you said, 10 chapters take 50 pages, and then 11 Savage Tales take 41 pages.
So
I mean,
right there,
yeah,
you
they're
were
really
almost
on
100
par.
pages of that. So that's why, you know, there's not many character options, and that's a big reason, is because there's almost 100, almost half of the, I mean, well, I guess a third of the book is this, right? Or so, yeah. And then the Bestiary. Carl, what do you think about the Bestiary?
I actually think it's really well done. Personally,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot going on. You do get definite description of the big boys, so
Yes.
you can see who they are and kind of their personality and what they're all about. Of course, obviously, you generally don't want to pit them up against players, because remember, anybody with a pitchfork can take someone out if you get the right rolls. But they're there that you can bring in as that big bad at some point in time.
And in the Plot Boy campaign, they obviously going to have interactions, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Then they talk about notable residents, which are NPCs you can leverage, all very quirky, interesting.
Yes.
So and then they have just kind of generic folks you might run into. They have the part called critters, which are all the creatures. I just love the
Animals.
names they use.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
just so fun.
Yeah.
But then they have some of these cryptids, and then demons.
Cryptids are like Bigfoot, stuff like that. I mean, the black dogs.
Yeah, cryptos like zoology,
cryptozoology. Yeah,
kind of creatures. So,
and then demons.
Right. And then there's demons. So it's all. I mean, there's a lot here.
And fae. Yeah.
I was looking through this, and a lot of the critters I could just see, kind of leveraging across a lot of different places. Even the cryptids are kind of cool, So, a very nice bestiary, yeah, for sure.
I was very impressed by the bestiary. It's big. There's a lot of unique mechanics in here, so this isn't just like, a couple of these things. And I mean, it's almost more interesting to me than the Pathfinder bestiary. Like, it is actually more interesting to me, the things in here. So there's a lot of different types. The way the demons are, they're split up into 3 different types of demons, and they're all kind of different. The fae, they really went good on the fae. The cryptids, there were some I just have no idea. I'm like, were these real in the mythology, or are these they just made up? I have no idea, because I knew about some of these. Like I said, I'm a big mythology geek. So yeah, the bestiary is great. Really, really good. Cool. So that was our overall kind of run through. Do we want to talk about some final impressions? What you think?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So for me, it's not my jam, right? It's probably not a setting that I would probably play, but that's who I am. I'm more sci-fi than kind of this kind of stuff. But reading it with the, other than having more character options, cool, a lot of plot point, a lot of opportunities to game, great amount of creatures. As a game master, if I didn't want to play the plot point campaign, which sometimes if you don't play it in some settings, that's sort of, you miss half of the setting, because that is what makes the setting the setting. Here, man, you could just pick the cities and the places and some of these interesting people and just run with it, because you've got all the creatures, you've got all the interesting stuff, and they do give you the big boys too, and so you can leverage them. I mean, you could even have a campaign where you're actually working with them if you really wanted to, right? Because you've got them there. So there's a lot. I think it's really well done, and like you said, the text is very dense. There's a lot of material there, so they're not wasting word count on fluff. Everything is there. It actually was hard a little bit to read because it was so much good information coming at you. There was like no chance to take a break from just absorbing stuff. But I think it's a fantastic setting for folks who want to dig into that and kind of play something that they probably have no idea about, and then immerse themselves in it, right? It's not fantasy, it's not sci-fi, it's not post-apocalypse. I mean, all the stuff people think about, it's something like different. So what are your thoughts?
I agree a lot. I do, Yeah, so overall, it's a really well-made product. Like I said, it's very dense. Um, uh, Everything is so evocative of the culture, but it is a lot of reading. Now, again, this is not Deadlands, so as a setting, it is not the expansiveness of Deadlands either. So, or Rifts, or any of the other kind of official settings, and that's a big thing to note. Is that, is this for you? So we usually do stuff like kind of like a buy, try, pass by. This doesn't really fit that format for me because here's what I'd say. Do I want to play this? I would love to play this. Do I want to GM this? No. Do I want to take a lot of the stuff in here and use it for other games? Yes. So when you were saying a lot of times, Carl, like, oh, I could use this for this, that's exactly what I was thinking. So even if you didn't have any intention of GMing this, or you're just curious about it, and you read it, you're like, I can't, it'd be hard for me to jam this. I don't know. There's so much stuff in here, just in the Bestiary and the Adventure Generator and and like the little adventures, whatever they're called.
Savage Tales.
Yeah, Savage Tales. Thank you. It's like 78 in my house right now. So, my brain's a little foggy. But you could just use that, and it would be a great resource for you because that stuff's just done amazingly. As we said, it's a very unique setting.
Well, you made me think of something. To the reading part, if you want to play this as a game master and you have players who don't like reading and they won't read part of the setting and they won't understand it, you're not going to have nearly as much fun because you're going to be bringing this culture to them as a game master and they're just going to fall flat. So hopefully your players like to read and absorb things and get excited about the cultures. Yeah, and
that was my main point, is that, I don't think this is necessarily a setting for everyone because it's so unique and because everything really requires a lot of reading. And like we said, the guy up front is an historian. He obviously loves, Appalachia, and you can tell. I mean, it does definitely comes through. But you have to be prepared as a GM. Like, you would really want to read everything or a lot of this and really understand all the cultural stuff, and you'd really want players who would be invested in it because there is not a lot of character options. So the players to kind of buy it, for them, that crutch of edges, that crutch of the unique mechanics for magical backgrounds, all that stuff is not there. So they really have to read and kind of understand what this is and what the world is like. So there's definitely, I don't think maybe wouldn't fit all tables just because of that, but I definitely think if people were willing to give it, it would be. I definitely think it's an amazing book. I would love to play this, like I said. So, and I think everybody would get value from it, right? Like, I think you were like, oh, the Bestiary is so cool, and I felt the same way.
Yeah, I could take a lot of stuff to other games for sure, and that's always a good thing from a setting standpoint.
Yeah,
but it's not going to be great for. Be honest, for kind of one-shotty things, because again, the players have to kind of buy in and really absorb it, and it feels like you need at least a mini campaign for this. My opinion, right? To really get everything out of it that you could. But I mean, that's nothing against the setting.
No,
it's the target. It's not targeting lazy groups who don't want to read and don't want to immerse themselves.
They're lazy.
They probably should just be playing D&D anyway, right? So
yeah, and
don't hit me.
Like,
don't hate me.
No. And again, like if you play, this isn't also the kind of setting. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I think generally, though, I think people would have a hard time if you ran the plot point campaign. This is not like a setting that you could constantly come back to and do a lot of, I don't know, different things. I think the style of game that it is, how everything's set up, is very much like the plot point campaign of you're these underdogs. Like you said, you could play as maybe the agents of the big boys, but there really isn't a lot of stuff in there to support that. I mean, you could definitely do it, right? But I think that this isn't Deadlands in the way of you could do so many different types of stories, within Deadlands. I don't know if you got the same impression. For me, I couldn't see a million different types of stories. Different types of narratives. Maybe it's kind of that.
This definitely would be once you play the plot point, you bring in the Savage Tales. You've probably hit a lot of the notes, right? That are there, and then. But that's what I'm saying. If you wanted to start a campaign without worrying about plot point and Savage Tales, I think there's stuff you could do. You could spend a lot of time starting small and don't start going all over the map yet. And there's probably some really interesting stuff you could do small and then grow. And I think you could do a campaign, but you gotta have players who are like, I want to, because again, there's not a lot of edges and the growth, and they just got to be like, I'm going to role play this out. It's all about role playing. It's all about the culture. And so anyway, I think we hit those. I think we kind of hit those points.
Overall, I think it would be, I mean, it's certainly memorable. And I think what I did see, the writing is really good. So I think it would be one of those ones that you would think about afterwards if you did play it. It's one of the ones that I think would stick with you just because of how unique it is and how everything was definitely geared to make you feel like, you know, you're the ultimate underdogs. Because you really are. I mean, you start the game with a shovel and a boot, right? Or something, whatever. So you are the ultimate underdog. So it would be one of those ones, it kind of almost reminds me of like playing the board games like Pandemic, like a legacy board game or something almost. Like one of those ones where you play it once and it's just so epic, you know, maybe you don't play it a lot afterwards, but you would always stick with you, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of saying that.
Yeah.
It'd be a great campaign to play for like 6 months, go through it, and then people would just remember it, and they probably would be talking about their character. Well, remember my miner Jim? And they'd be bringing them into other things, and it'd be kind of cool, but it's not going to be a long-term campaign just because the constraints put around it. It's a personal opinion. I mean, probably maybe somebody could get 3 years out of it, but I think it's really targeted. Just if you want to learn some fun stuff and have a good feeling and something you've never done before, at least I'm pretty sure no one's ever done it before. This is a great place to go for a while to have fun. GMing, it'd probably be tough for me to GM it.
Me too.
I'd almost feel like I could never do it justice. You know. So anyway, so we good? We think we're at a good spot?
Yeah, I think. I mean, we're a good spot.
Yeah, I think
nothing else to say.
I think there's lots you can get from it. So Game Master probably should have it, even if they're not going to run it.
Yes.
Players would probably really enjoy if somebody could run it for them and do a short-term campaign to learn all the areas.
Yes, please run it for me. Please run it for me and Carl. We will. I will play this.
Yeah.
So please run somebody who knows it. Please.
I may have a minor Jim. You know. So anyway.
Okay.
So this is Carl and Eric with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. I forgot to tell you up front. And hopefully you enjoyed this. And we'll catch you everybody later. Thanks for all the support.
Bye.
It's a savage